My name is Donna Freeman, and I'm 29 years old. I'm a high school teacher in Fort Wayne, Indiana, pouring my heart into helping students discover their potential and find the confidence to express themselves. I've always believed that my work could change someone's life, even in small ways, and that belief gave me pride and purpose. But last month, when I walked into my dad's birthday dinner carrying a homemade cake and a bottle of wine, I hoped just once my family might see me for who I really am. Instead, I received a wound I'll never forget. My mom looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We wish we didn't have to deal with you." And my dad, he just nodded as if it meant nothing. Those words burned like fire, cutting deeper than any argument we'd ever had. My whole life I had been the invisible one, constantly overshadowed by my older brother, the golden child, with the prestigious job and perfect life. I had stayed silent, endured the comparisons, and waited for recognition. But that night, something inside me finally broke. I stood up, stared them down, and said, "Perfect. Don't call me when you need help." Then I walked out, my heart pounding, knowing it was over. 1 week later, my phone lit up, 30 missed calls from Dad and a single desperate text from Mom. "Please." What would you have done if your parents said those words to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to see how others might have handled this situation. Growing up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, our middle-class life looked picture-perfect: nice house, annual vacations, Sunday dinners. But beneath it all, I was the odd one out. My older brother, the golden child, was the star. A lawyer with a corner office, he'd just bought a sleek new house and landed a big promotion. My parents couldn't stop bragging. My father, retired from a bank job, would beam every time my brother's name came up, recounting his latest courtroom win. My mother, who manages a local retail store, would chime in, praising his work ethic, his charm, his everything. Me, I'm just Donna, the high school English teacher helping kids navigate Shakespeare and their own struggles. I love my job, but to my parents, it's a dead-end career, not ambitious enough. For years, I tried to win their approval. I organized family events, Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, even a surprise anniversary for my parents. I'd spend hours planning menus, decorating, making sure everything was perfect. Once I lent my mother $2,000 when her car broke down, no questions asked. Another time, I drove 3 hours round trip to pick up my father's old friend from the airport when my brother was too busy. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. At every gathering, they'd steer the conversation back to my brother's achievements, his new car, his fancy clients. If I mentioned a student I'd helped through a tough time, like one who'd nearly dropped out but graduated because of my support, my mother would nod politely, then say, "That's nice, but your brother just closed a huge case." My father would agree, adding, "He's really going places." It wasn't just the dismissal that stung, it was the constant comparison. Growing up, I'd hear, "Why can't you be more like him?" My brother soaked it up, never once defending me. His wife, always by his side, would smile and nod as if I didn't exist. I kept showing up, though, hoping one day they'd see me. I'd call my mother every week, checking in, offering to help with errands. I'd sit through their stories about my brother, swallowing the hurt, thinking maybe this time they'd ask about my life. They never did. My best friend, a fellow teacher, kept telling me to stop trying. "They don't deserve you," she'd say over coffee at our favorite Fort Wayne diner. She was right, but I couldn't let go. Family's supposed to matter, right? The worst part was how they took me for granted. Last year, I spent weeks organizing my father's retirement party. I booked the venue, sent invites, even paid for half the catering, $500 out of my own pocket. My brother showed up late, gave a quick toast, and got all the credit. My parents thanked him for making it special. I stood there forcing a smile while my mother hugged him. They didn't even mention my name. Another time, I helped a student write a college essay that got her a full scholarship. I was so proud, I told my parents at dinner. My father barely looked up from his plate. "That's good," he said, then turned to my brother. "Tell us about that new client of yours." It was like I was invisible. I kept thinking if I tried harder, they'd notice. I'd bring homemade desserts to dinners, offer advice when my mother complained about work, even help my father with his taxes when my brother didn't have time. But nothing changed. My brother was their pride and joy. I was just the backup. My best friend saw it clearly. "They're using you," she said one night as we graded papers together. "You're worth more than this." I wanted to believe her, but walking away felt impossible. Family's supposed to stick together even when it hurts. So I kept showing up, hoping for a moment when they'd see me as more than a disappointment. That hope carried me right into my father's birthday dinner, where everything was about to change. That evening felt heavier than usual. I sat at the dining table in my parents' Fort Wayne home, the smell of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filling the air. My father's birthday dinner was in full swing, the table crowded with relatives and a few of his old bank colleagues. My older brother Eric held court as always. He leaned back in his chair, grinning as my mother gushed about his latest triumph, a big promotion at his law firm. "He's running the whole department now," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "And that new house of his 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, just stunning." My father nodded, raising his glass. To Eric, making us proud. Everyone cheered, clinking glasses, while I forced a smile, my fork poking at my plate. His wife, sitting next to him, beamed like she'd won the lottery. I'd heard it all before, the endless praise for Eric's achievements. But I thought tonight might be different. I'd had a tough week at school, but also a win. One of my students, a quiet girl named Lily, had been struggling with panic attacks, barely showing up to class. I'd spent weeks talking her through it, connecting her with a counselor, even helping her rewrite a late essay to pass English. She'd just told me she was back on track, even thinking about college. It felt like a small victory, the kind that keeps me going. So when the table quieted for a moment, I took a deep breath and spoke up. "I had a good week too," I said, looking around. "One of my students was in a rough spot, but I helped her through a crisis. She's doing so much better now." The words barely left my mouth before my mother cut in. "That's nice, Donna," she said, her tone flat like she was humoring a child. "But teaching's such a simple job. Have you thought about doing something bigger like Eric? Maybe go back to school, get a real career?" The table went silent. My father looked down at his plate, not saying a word. Eric smirked, swirling his wineglass. His wife glanced at me, then away like she hadn't heard. My cheeks burned, but I tried again. "It's not simple," I said, my voice tighter. "This girl was falling apart. I spent hours helping her, and now she's got a shot at college." My mother waved a hand, dismissing me. "That's sweet, but let's be real. Eric's out there winning cases, buying property. You should aim higher, Donna." I gripped my napkin, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream that teaching wasn't lesser, that helping a kid like Lily mattered. But the words stuck in my throat. My father finally looked up, but only to say, "She's right, Donna. You could do more." Eric leaned forward, his voice smug. "Teaching's fine, but it's not exactly changing the world, is it?" His wife giggled, covering her mouth. The relatives murmured, some nodding, others avoiding my eyes. I felt like I was shrinking, my efforts reduced to nothing in their eyes. I'd spent years trying to prove myself, showing up for them, but here I was, invisible again. The conversation shifted back to Eric, his new car, his next big case. I sat there, barely touching my food, the chatter blurring into noise. My mother laughed at one of Eric's jokes, her eyes sparkling, while my father clapped him on the shoulder. I was just a guest at their table, not their daughter. Every word they said about Eric felt like a jab, reminding me I'd never measure up. I kept my head down, trying to hold it together, but inside I was boiling. I'd come to this dinner hoping for a moment of connection, but all I got was the same old script. Eric's the star, and I'm the disappointment. The dessert plates were cleared and the mood shifted. The chatter at my father's birthday dinner died down as my mother leaned forward, her wineglass in hand, a serious look on her face. "We need to talk about the future," she said, glancing at my father. The relatives fell silent, their eyes darting between her and my older brother Eric. I sat stiffly still, stinging from my mother's earlier dismissal of my work. My father nodded, folding his hands. "It's time we sorted out the estate," he said. "The house, the savings, everything we've worked for." My stomach twisted. I'd never heard them talk about this so openly, not with me in the room. My mother spoke first. "Eric's done so well," she said, her voice warm as she looked at him. "He's reliable, successful. It makes sense for him to handle most of it." Eric sat up straighter, his chest puffed out. His wife squeezed his arm, her smile wide. "We're thinking of leaving the house to you, Eric," my father added. "You've got a family, a future to build. It's only fair." I blinked, trying to process. The house where I'd grown up, where I'd carved my initials into the backyard tree, was being handed to my brother like I didn't exist. I opened my mouth to speak, but my mother kept going. "You're the one we can count on," she said to Eric. "Not everyone pulls their weight." That hit me like a punch. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice sharp. The table went quiet. My mother raised an eyebrow like I'd overstepped. "Oh, Donna, don't make a scene," she said. "You know what I mean. Your teaching job, it's fine, but it's not like you're building anything substantial. You're more of a burden than a help." My heart stopped. A burden I'd spent years helping them, planning their parties, lending money, being there. My father didn't look at me, just sipped his coffee. Eric leaned back, his lips twitching like he was enjoying this. His wife stared at her plate, silent. I couldn't stay quiet. "A burden," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been there for you every time you needed me. I've given everything, and you call me that." My mother sighed like I was being difficult. "Donna, let's be honest," she said. "Eric's the one who's made something of himself. You're just there. We wish we didn't have to deal with you." The words landed like a blade. My father nodded, his face calm like he agreed completely. The relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Eric's wife glanced at me, then away, her silence louder than words. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "You're wrong," I said, my voice low but steady. "I've given you more than you deserve." My mother rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. Eric chuckled, muttering, "Always making it about you?" I looked around the table at the faces that wouldn't meet my eyes. My whole life I'd tried to prove I was enough, but in that moment I saw the truth. They'd never see me. My father's nod, my mother's words. They weren't just a slip, they meant it. I grabbed my purse, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them feel the weight of their words, but I held it together barely. I took one last look at my parents, at Eric's smug face, at the family that had just written me off. I'd come to this dinner hoping for a shred of respect, but I was done begging for it. I turned, walked out of the dining room, and left my parents' Fort Wayne house behind, the front door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I climbed into my car, hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I wanted to cry, to scream, to drive back and beg them to take it all back. But something deeper kept me still, a resolve I hadn't felt before. For years, I'd poured myself into that family, trying to earn a place they'd never give me. I'd stayed up late planning their events, dipped into my savings to help them, sat through their endless praise of Eric. And for what? To be called a burden, to be erased no more. I wasn't going back to that table, to that life of begging for scraps of their approval. I was done. Driving home to my small apartment, I felt the weight of that decision settle in. It hurt, God, it hurt, but it also felt like freedom. I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was leaving behind years of trying to fit into their mold. I thought about my students, the kids I'd helped find their strength, like Lily, who'd smiled for the first time in weeks when she passed her English class. That's who I was. Not a burden, but someone who made a difference. I pulled into my parking lot, the streetlights casting shadows across my dashboard, and made a promise to myself I was going to live for me now, not them. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest. I didn't want their calls, their apologies, if they even came. I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee and wrote a list. First, I'd protect my peace. I'd change my number, my email, anything that tied me to their expectations. I didn't want to hear my mother's voice, or my father's excuses, or Eric's smug comments. I called my best friend Irene, a fellow teacher who'd always seen through my family's nonsense. "I'm done with them," I told her over the phone. She didn't hesitate. "Good," she said. "You're worth more than their garbage." Her words steadied me like a lifeline. I spent the day tying up loose ends. I contacted my phone provider, switched to a new number, and set up a fresh email account. I didn't tell my parents or Eric. Let them figure it out. I thought about my father's birthday gift, a leather-bound journal I'd picked out because he loved to write. It was still in my trunk unopened. I decided to donate it to the school library instead. My mother's voice played in my mind. "We wish we didn't have to deal with you," but I pushed it away. I wasn't going to let their words define me anymore. By evening, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried for years. I called another teacher, Martha, who'd invited me to a book club before. "I'm in," I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. She laughed, thrilled, and told me about their next meeting. I also signed up to volunteer at a local community center, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for, always too busy with family obligations. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, still hurting but certain. I was building a life that was mine, and I wasn't looking back. A week had passed since I walked out. My phone, now with a new number, buzzed with notifications from friends and colleagues, but none from my family. I'd made sure of that. I'd switched my email too, severing every digital tie to my parents and Eric. The first few days were quiet, almost too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Then the calls started coming to my old number, the one I'd left behind. My provider sent me a log, 30 missed calls from my father, each one a silent plea I refused to answer. My mother sent a single text to my old email, "Please." It was short, desperate, but it didn't move me. I'd meant what I said. They didn't get to pull me back after years of pushing me away. I deleted the log, blocked their numbers on every platform, and moved on. Life in Fort Wayne took on a new rhythm. I threw myself into my work, finding purpose in my students. One boy, Jamal, had been failing English, too shy to speak in class. I started meeting him after school, helping him analyze poetry, watching his confidence grow with every line he read aloud. His first A on a quiz felt like my victory too. Teaching wasn't just a job, it was my anchor. I leaned on Irene, my best friend who'd always had my back. We'd meet at a local cafe, sipping lattes, laughing over her dating disasters or my quirky lesson plans. "You're glowing," she said one day, her eyes bright. "This is the real you?" She was right. I was finding pieces of myself I'd buried for too long. The book club I'd joined with Martha, another teacher, became my sanctuary. We met every Tuesday at a cozy Fort Wayne library, discussing novels over wine and cheese. I dove into stories, classics like Jane Eyre, modern picks like The Nightingale, finding solace in characters who fought for their place in the world. One night I shared how Jane's resilience inspired me to stand up for myself. The group listened, nodded, and Martha squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you know," she said. It felt like family, the kind I'd chosen, not inherited. I started speaking up more, sharing my thoughts without fear of being dismissed. The club wasn't just about books. It was about belonging. Volunteering at the community center filled my weekends. I signed up to mentor teens, helping them with homework, or just listening when they needed to talk. One girl, Mia, reminded me of myself, quiet, eager to please, always overlooked. I taught her to write short stories, watched her light up when her work was praised. It healed something in me, giving her the validation I'd craved. The center's coordinator, a coach named Roger, noticed my dedication. "You're a natural," he said, his smile warm. We started chatting during breaks, bonding over our love for helping kids. He was kind, grounded, nothing like the arrogance I'd grown up with in Eric. Those conversations sparked something new, a flicker of hope, for connections that didn't hurt. My days were full, my heart fuller. I'd come home to my apartment grade papers with music playing and feel a peace I hadn't known before. I wasn't running from my past, I was building over it. Irene and I planned a hiking trip, something I'd never done because I was always too busy with family obligations. Martha invited me to a poetry slam where I clapped for strangers bearing their souls. Every step felt like a reclaiming a way to prove I wasn't the burden my mother had called me. My work, my friends, my new routines, they were mine, built on my terms. 3 months in, I checked my old email one last time, curious. A few messages from my mother, one from Eric's wife, all unanswered. I felt a pang, but not regret. I'd given them years of my loyalty. They'd given me nothing but judgment. I closed the account for good, my fingers steady on the delete button. My life was moving forward and I wasn't looking back. But the past has a way of catching up. 6 months had passed, and my life felt like my own. Then, one Tuesday evening, as I was leaving the Fort Wayne Library after book club, an email pinged on my phone. It was from Wendy, my brother's wife, sent to my new email address. Someone must have given it to her. The subject line read, "We need your help." My stomach sank. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family since the night I walked out. I opened the email expecting an apology, but instead, it was a plea. Eric had been charged with embezzling client funds, hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from his law firm's accounts. The news had hit Fort Wayne like a scandal splashed across local headlines. My parents, who'd pinned all their hopes on him, were ruined. They'd sold their house, the one they'd planned to leave to Eric to cover legal fees and debts. Now Wendy wrote they were broke, living in a cramped rental, and she and Eric were facing eviction. "Can we stay with you just for a bit?" she begged. "We have nowhere else to go." I sat in my car, the library's glow fading behind me, and reread the email. Eric, the golden child, had fallen. The man my parents had called reliable was a fraud. I felt a flicker of vindication, but it was drowned out by a deeper ache. They'd chosen him over me, and now their world was collapsing. I thought about my mother's words. My father's nod, the years I'd spent trying to prove I wasn't a burden. Wendy's email wasn't an apology, it was a demand, as if I owed them a lifeline after everything. I closed the email, my hands steady, and drove home. I wasn't going to let them back in. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, and drafted a response. I kept it short, cold, deliberate. "Wendy," I wrote, "I'm sorry you're in this mess. Contact a bankruptcy lawyer, there are good ones in Fort Wayne. I can't help beyond that." I didn't offer my apartment, didn't suggest a meeting. I hit send and shut my laptop. The next day, Wendy replied, her tone frantic. "Please, Donna, just talk to us. We're family." I read it once and deleted it. Family. They'd made it clear I wasn't part of theirs. I'd spent 6 months building a life without their judgment, and I wasn't going to undo it for their crisis. I leaned on Irene, my best friend, to process it. Over coffee at our usual cafe, I told her about the email. "They're desperate," I said, stirring my latte. Irene snorted. "They made their bed," she said. "Eric's a crook, and they bet on the wrong horse. You don't owe them anything." Her bluntness grounded me. I'd been so used to carrying their weight, planning their parties, lending money, that saying no felt foreign, but right. I changed the subject, telling her about a student who'd written a brilliant essay on Toni Morrison. Irene grinned proud, and we planned our next hiking trip. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built with people who saw my worth. At the community center where I volunteered, I kept my focus on the kids. Mia, the teen I was mentoring, had just finished a short story for a local contest. I helped her polish it, watching her confidence bloom. Roger, the coach, stopped by during a session, offering to read it. "You're doing something real here," he told me, his voice warm. I smiled, grateful for the support. The center, the book club with Martha, my classroom, they were my anchors, not my family's drama. I heard through a mutual friend that my parents were struggling, borrowing money from relatives, their pride shattered. Eric faced jail time, his reputation in ruins. I felt a pang of pity, but it passed. They'd built their lives around his success, and now they were paying the price. I kept moving forward, my days filled with purpose. I didn't check my old email anymore, didn't look for their calls. Wendy sent one more message begging again, but I didn't reply. My silence was my answer. I'd given them enough years of my heart, my time, my loyalty. Now I was choosing myself. But some choices come with unexpected consequences. A year had passed since that night. I stood in my classroom now with a new title, head of the English department, organizing lesson plans for the upcoming semester. The promotion had come after months of hard work mentoring students and leading curriculum changes. My desk was cluttered with thank you notes from kids I'd helped, their words a reminder of why I stayed in teaching. Outside of work, my life in Fort Wayne was full, rich, with people who lifted me up. Irene, my best friend, was a constant. Our weekly coffee dates now included Roger, the coach from the community center who'd become more than a friend. Together, we'd built a circle of trust, a chosen family that made every day brighter. I was happy, not because life was perfect, but because it was mine. My days were a blend of purpose and joy. At school, I guided my department planning workshops to help teachers engage struggling students. One afternoon, I ran a session on creative writing, watching a shy freshman beam as her peers praised her story. It reminded me of my own journey, finding my voice, claiming my worth. After work, I'd head to the book club with Martha, another teacher, where we'd dissect novels and share laughs over glasses of Merlot. Roger joined us sometimes, his quiet humor grounding the group. Irene and I still hiked our latest trip through a snowy trail, leaving us breathless and giddy. I volunteered at the community center, mentoring teens like Mia, whose stories were now published in a local anthology. Each moment felt like a brick in the foundation of a life I'd built without my family's shadow. I heard about my parents and Eric through a distant cousin. Their financial ruin was complete. The money from selling their house hadn't been enough to cover Eric's debts or legal fees after his embezzlement conviction. My parents were scraping by in a small apartment, their savings gone, their pride shattered. Eric was serving a 3-year sentence, his law career over. Wendy had moved in with her sister, struggling to rebuild. They'd tried reaching out again through mutual friends, but I didn't respond. I'd given them my loyalty for years, only to be called a burden. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer, not now, maybe not ever. Their choices had led them here, just as mine had led me to this new life. One evening, as I sat with Irene and Roger at a local diner, I reflected on how far I'd come. Irene was teasing Roger about his terrible taste in music, and I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. I thought about the girl I'd been at that birthday dinner, desperate for approval, shrinking under my mother's words. That version of me was gone. I'd learned to love myself not for what I could prove to others, but for who I was: a teacher, a friend, someone who showed up for those who mattered. Irene caught my eye, sensing my quiet moment. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, smiling. "Better than okay," I said. Roger squeezed my hand under the table, his warmth a steady reminder of the life I'd chosen. The biggest lesson wasn't about cutting ties or proving them wrong. It was about choosing myself every day in every decision. I chose to surround myself with people like Irene and Roger, who saw my worth without me begging for it. I chose my students who reminded me I could make a difference. I chose teaching not because it was flashy, but because it was meaningful. My family's downfall was a distant echo, a consequence of their own making. I didn't gloat, didn't dwell. I'd moved on, not out of spite, but because I deserved to. As I walked home that night, the Fort Wayne skyline glowing under a clear sky, I felt whole. My apartment was small, my life simple, but it was enough. I'd built something real, something lasting. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape.